15 minutes after 8. Thank you for your company this morning. Alan spoke a couple of weeks ago to a lady called Helen Irlen. She devised what's known as the Irlen method. It uses coloured lenses to help people suffering from what Dr. Irlen describes as a processing problem, but it's not an optical issue. It's a problem with the brain's ability to process visual information. Symptoms can include sensitivity to light, reading problems, discomfort, and attention and concentration problems too. And thousands of people, once diagnosed as slow learners or even dyslexic, are now able to read like the rest of us thanks to these lenses. As Alan said at the time, Dr. Irlen has come back to Australia, and she's here right now until May 3. Her visit takes in Canberra, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and to find out more, visit the website of the Australasian Association of Irlen Consultants. The address is aaic.org.au, aaic.org.au, or you can call, by the way, 9747 1122, 9747 1122. Dr. Helen Irlen is on the line. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning, Chris. It's nice to talk with you.
Good to have you back in Australia. The condition I mentioned briefly there, the problem with processing information, you call it Irlen syndrome. Tell us what that is.
Well, it's a form of dyslexia, but it can cause problems with not just reading, but because it's a processing problem, it can cause difficulties copying information accurately from the board, attending and concentrating in class. And one of the issues for me in coming here is the fact that, one, you can't add more money and funding when the classroom environment is not conducive for learning for over 50% of those who are now struggling with reading and copying, attention and concentration and performance. And it's simple things like we have put black print on high-gloss whiteboards. All books are black on white. Computers and iPads are difficult to read for these students. And to make matters worse, every classroom is fluorescent lighting. And the longer the child or adult works under these conditions, the worse things get. So it becomes like a bicycle where you're pedaling hard, but you're just going backwards.
Yeah, for those who design classrooms and those in the education sector, they need to heed this very, very quickly. So what is it that gets in the way of me seeing something and my brain processing it? What's causing this?
It's like an optical illusion for the people we work with. When they look at black print, when they're under fluorescent lighting, print and numbers become an optical illusion. So they're hard to see and process. And the other issue that people aren't aware of, that they have students sitting in class trying to read, trying to do homework, trying to copy, and it creates physical symptoms for them. They may be tired, they may be getting headaches, print may be moving on the page, and we don't pay attention to these issues and we don't ask questions about them, so it goes unrecognized and undiagnosed.
How prevalent is it?
It's about 12 to 14% of the general population, but we find consistently it's 50% of those struggling in school. And there's a simple solution. And what makes, to me, is shocking is that in Australia today, no teachers, no school psychologists are being trained, and you need to educate the educators, to recognize these symptoms, to recognize these students, and apply appropriate interventions like the concept of the Irlen method with colored overlays and Irlen spectral filters, where tens of thousands of teachers are doing it in the U.S., thousands in Brazil, Canada, and the U.K., and they are not doing it at all or allowed to do it here in Australia. And there's a simple, inexpensive solution.
So you just mentioned then coloured overlays and spectrum filters. How does it work? How does that work in offsetting what they face in a classroom?
People typically think of vision in terms of just the eye, but there's the visual cortex or the brain that has to read and process the information. So the color works to correct things in the brain as eyeglasses do for the eye. So it has to correct the signal that goes to the brain so the brain can accurately now process the information. The individual can then see it accurately, read it accurately and comfortably. I'll tell you a funny story of one child who's, as she kept reading, the print would run around on the page and become ants, and she got so frustrated that she took out some insecticide and tried to spray the page with insecticide.
You discovered this decades ago. What sort of improvements have you recorded?
That's another sad issue. We've been talking about this for decades.
Yeah.
It should be integrated, especially since I created a method to integrate it for educators into the educational system. The success rate is when we can identify an individual and say, yes, this is what you have, and there's very easy self-tests that are available on the website so that someone can self-identify. In addition, the problem's hereditary. So parents are angry and frustrated with the school system because all the system does is does more of the same. They're aware of the fact that it never helped them, and they're still living with the problem, so they're angry and frustrated with the system, okay? But once we can identify it, the intervention of these simple interventions by method eliminates the problem totally. So we've seen children immediately, because they have the skills, they just can't utilize their reading skills. So the improvement in reading rate, accuracy, and comprehension can be significant. It can be grade levels almost immediately.
It isn't for everyone, though, right?
No. That's why we have self-tests and screening methods to just identify those who can be helped.
How much do the lenses cost?
That's a good question. In terms of, let me start with the overlays. The overlays are a couple of dollars.
A couple of dollars?
Yeah, just a couple of dollars.
What about fitting them?
No, that's just the overlays, which are colored plastic sheets that go over the page that we like to get into the school system for the teachers to be able to identify. But for the child to really be able to fully be able to get information from the board, to sit under fluorescent lights and not daydream and be able to attend, to be able to do math so that they're not making careless errors and numbers stay lined up, then we go on to the next step. We first make sure that the color will make a moderate to considerable difference, and then we go on to creating specific colored overlays for each individual's brain that they wear as glasses.
Right. You know,
and that is a little bit more expensive because there's some diagnostic testing that goes along with all this process.
You touched on at the very start of our interview about how money doesn't necessarily mean you've got an answer to lifting educational standards. And education and literacy are obvious passions of yours. There's been no shortage of debate here on that front. The federal government, as I know you're aware, is throwing bucket loads of money at the problem. You're not sure that's the best approach. Tell us why.
Because all they're doing is more of the same. And that's not going to work for the kids who are struggling. They're obviously not succeeding with what's being done. Doing more of it and having them do more of it is just going to increase the problem.
And what about relying so heavily on the NAPLAN tests and the levels that have come from the standardized test?
Oh, you want me to comment on that? In the U.S., we've been doing that, and what happens is that forcing the teachers to do that, the teachers start teaching to the test.
Yeah.
And the children are learning well.
I know that's happening. I've got kids who are 8 and 10, and I know that's happening at the moment.
Oh, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
We're not educating the kids. We're just educating them in terms of what the tests want them to know.
You talk about the root cause of people struggling with reading. What sorts of issues, in your experience, come into play there?
Well, the one that I talk about the most is the perceptual processing, since it seems to be affecting 50% of those who are struggling. But there are other issues, and the point is we're not looking for underlying causes. And that's what you need to do, is because you have to correctly identify underlying causes. Like if somebody comes in with a sore throat in the medical profession, they have to decide and find out whether it's a virus or tonsillitis or even cancer. But they have to address it appropriately, and we're not doing that in terms of education. We're not saying that there are underlying causes that actually have solutions.
Well, keep spreading the word, and that's obviously one of the reasons for your trip in Australia. We can hear about what you're up to here by going to the website, right? aaic.org.au, aaic.org.au. And also, that's where the test can be found too, right?
Yes, with the self-test can be found.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
The number you gave, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, all the very best. And that number, 97471122, 97471122. It's a fascinating area, isn't it? Dr. Helen Erlin. It's 23 minutes after 8.
2GB traffic, thanks to Fantastic Furniture. Aussie-made queen mattresses starting at just $199.
And North Sydney break.